Good evening, everyone. My name is Rudy Page and welcome once again to Vaccine Confidence Dialogues Online. And also welcome to our first knowledge exchange and thought leadership forum within this process of, within this series of online dialogues. We've invited Reach Society, who continue to demonstrate the values and qualities of servant leadership with a professional commitment for community progression. Reach Society members in health and social care and beyond have been active throughout lockdown and the vaccine rollout. So good evening all.
Good evening, Rudy.
Great to see you all, great to see you all. So this evening we've got Emeritus Professor Sir Jeff Palmer. He's a patron of Reach Society, Dr. Winston Morgan, UEL Reader, Angela Clark, CEO of RAFA, Veta McGuinness, Enfield Caribbean Association Chair, and Professor Donald Palmer, Program Director of Reach Society, and Dwayne Neal, who is the Chairman of Reach Society. Dwayne, I'm going to come to you first before we hear from our colleagues. What next after the vaccination, or what are the wider implications for our community after the pandemic comes under control?
Thank you, Rudy, for giving me this opportunity just to look down the road. One of the things I've learned from my working life for 40 years in private sector is taking a look at the wider implications of the things you're doing gives you an early roadmap into what you should be considering, what you should be addressing. And I think with something like the pandemic, hopefully herd immunity by vaccination is not far away. It's right that our community, the Black community, should look at the wider implications of being vaccinated and also of having a sizable minority not being vaccinated. And, you know, if we take on that latter point first, one of the implications of having too many not being protected is that those individuals continue to be vulnerable to infection. And dependent on the age range they're in, the older end, many of them will die. And also a good proportion of them could become disabled because of long COVID. Another clear indication of not being vaccinated, dependent on the area of work you're involved in, there could be pressure for you to take the vaccine or lose your employment. And for those who hold out to the bitter end, it could well mean that there is no income to maintain your family. And if they have a mortgage, it could well mean they could find themselves losing the roof over their heads. And those are just two of the obvious implications. But there are other ones which we may not consider, but we should consider. The possibility of just traveling when other people are getting back to doing that activity, again, if you're not vaccinated, it could restrict your travel. But closer to home, it could also restrict your access to certain social activities where there could be pressure to say, show us that you have been vaccinated. And if you haven't been, you will be barred from accessing those social activities. But, you know, it goes even deeper than that. The anecdotal evidence is that a number of young people from our community have suffered during the year of lockdown. And if our children have actually not kept up in their education, one of the things Black families should be thinking of doing sooner rather than later is take stock of where their children are in their education. And that is something that if they speak to an educator, a teacher with that experience, they can get the assistance they need. They should not just assume their children will just carry on from where they are, because the gap could be quite significant. Other things which I think given the messaging around the last year that we should not ignore the diseases and underlying issues that has been said many, many times afflicting the Black community, I believe every Black family should be asking the question about not just their mental health, but their physical health. You know, are we an overweight or obese family? We should be honest about that. Are we living with hypertension for longer than perhaps we should? Are we living with diabetes when in fact there are programs out there to help people to reverse it? Are we doing the sort of things around our meals, which is actually adding to those health issues rather than helping us to roll them back? So for me, all of those things now should be considered in order that we can own our future. And the final thing I would say is we as a community should take time to grieve for the family members and loved ones who we've lost to the pandemic these last 12 or so months, and also take time to celebrate the fact that we have survived. Mm-hmm. And in doing that collectively, we're going to help each other to move forward. So those are the wider implications I can see immediately with the position we're in at the moment.
Right. Thank you very much for that comprehensive overview, Dwayne. Thank you. Angela Clark, I'd like to come to you now, give you an opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rudy, for the opportunity. It's good to be on this forum. I suppose as a manager of adult health and social care, I have seen all sides of the effects of the pandemic, also personal effects myself. I myself have had COVID. I myself have had family members that have died from blood clots and also from COVID itself. Being in the adult social care sector, it has been the most vulnerable sector in my view, as well as the NHS. We've not heard much about the social care sector. We've heard a lot about the NHS, but when you think of the far-reaching work of the social care workers and what they have to do, in the care homes, you would have heard that there were over 30,000 deaths from COVID in the care homes alone. So that would have a devastating effect on individuals working in that area. Getting on to the vaccine, certainly the vaccine is helping the situation, because as already we are experiencing a definite decrease in the number of COVID cases that are coming through the hospitals, and therefore the number of deaths that are happening in the care homes. Nevertheless, some of the things that Dr. Neil spoke about, I can definitely say that I definitely agree with. We have seen, certainly in the Black community and the Black social care workers, we have seen devastating effects on them as workers. They have themselves experienced vicarious trauma as a result of having to care for the most vulnerable. They are more vulnerable and are right at the front line, and have had to face all sorts of issues around situations around PPE and things like that. Now, coming out of the pandemic, we are seeing that although numbers are increasing in those who are accepting the vaccine, it is still a slow process. And we are finding that we're having to do more and more to provide the education, to provide the platforms for them to ask the questions that they need answered. It's been a difficult time for everyone, for all concerned, but certainly those in the social care sector, the future for them, it doesn't seem as bright as it is, you might think, because for them, as Dr. Neil said, there is the whole issue around employment, about whether the vaccine is going to be mandatory. For those who can take the vaccine and have agreed to take the vaccine, that's fine. But what I found, certainly during the year of the pandemic, was the high number of minority groups who actually had to be off work because they were themselves extremely clinically vulnerable and not actually able to work. And now coming back after the lockdown is easing, now are finding themselves in a situation where some may be able to take the vaccine, hesitancy is still around, and then concerns about jobs, because as you have heard, the no jab, no job situation is now looming very much around all of the social care networks. There's also talk about maybe booster vaccines being required. So it's not just about the first and second stage vaccine. There's talk about the possibility of future vaccines to keep it going. So for the social care workers, it's not an easy situation. Yes, we've had vicarious trauma, trauma upon trauma, personal trauma. And as Dr. Neil said, yes, we do need to grieve, but the social care workers haven't had time to grieve. They've had to keep going. They've had to keep providing the care in the care homes and also out in the community, still remaining quite vulnerable themselves. Yes, the vaccine, we know that the vaccine is the answer for improving the situation. And as I say, certainly in the hospitals and in the care homes, we are already experiencing the positive results of people taking the vaccines. But more needs to be done, definitely, to educate, to inform. I like the idea of having videos in different languages so that people can access. I do think that is a good idea. But I wouldn't want it to be a one-hit wonder. This has to be ongoing. And even though we're easing out of lockdown, I don't feel that we can relax about this. I don't think that just because a date has been given, because we are still experiencing people who are ill. We still have all of the health inequalities that Dr. Neil talked about. Those are still things that we need to be mindful of. There are situations whereby all of the plan or the planned visits were put on hold. So we're going to be dealing with a backlog of operations there's an increasing demand in services. So all of those things are going to have a definite impact. So, the constant reminder about the vaccine, the constant reinforcement of the importance of people accessing the vaccine, and actually what you've talked about with regards to accessible points for people to actually get vaccinated, that is an issue. Already we are hearing about the lack of the second vaccines for some of the frontline workers who have taken maybe one vaccine and then the second isn't available, and and the shortages of vaccines and things like that. So all of this will cause some level of anxiety for individuals who want to keep themselves safe, who want to protect people that they're actually also serving.
Okay, thanks for that. Aveta, I'd like to hear from you now.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I will try my best not to cover what Angela has already covered. She's made a lot of really good points. I'm glad I'm second. My name's Aveta McInnes. I'm the chair of the Enfield Caribbean Association. And just to say a little bit about my background, because I was a teacher for 36 years, a manager in education, and a biologist and science teacher. So I'm coming from this very much from the biological point of view as well as the social. In my role, chair of Enfield Caribbean Association, we feel very strongly that we are leaders in our community and that we have a responsibility to have a voice. And we made that decision that as community leaders, particularly of the Caribbean community, that we needed to have a voice and we couldn't sit on the fence. It was too important. So one of the things that we did straight away was when one of us had the vaccine, we were willing to have our photo of us having the vaccine placed on our website so people could see it, because it's a message straight away that we are pro-vaccine. And Paul Riddell, whom some of you will know, who's our vice chair, if you go to our website, it's the first message that you see. So it sends out a message. secondly, we felt that we needed to, reaching our community, we've used our newsletter to open the debate and to challenge some of the ideas and the myths. And in my personal life, as well as in my professional life and my role in the Enfield Caribbean Association, I've been faced with a lot of those myths. I'm glad Angela mentioned the video, because one of the ways in which our community has been greatly affected, inflicted, I would say, is by videos, the WhatsApp videos. And I'm sure, like me, a lot of you received many of them at the start of this pandemic. And then I had to make a decision not to watch anymore, because so many were not actually based on any truth, but they were very influential. So having videos that counteract and also give truth to our community is actually really important. But it's important that they keep up with the dialogue, with the landscape, because it keeps changing. But just a few things I just want to say about what we've been doing in terms of trying to change minds and work with where we are. In Enfield, as the ECA, have been working with the Primary Care Trust, the NHS Primary Care Trust, and having dialogue with them. And we're doing webinars. We have one next Thursday where we're reaching particularly the Caribbean community, and they're doing different webinars for different community groups, and actually dealing with the issues for each group, because they're not all the same for the minority groups. But they're having the same effect, the low uptake of the vaccine. So one of the things that seems to have worked, and speaking to friends personally, is the GP calling home, calling people individually who they know, who are vulnerable, and actually saying, you haven't taken up the vaccine, what are you, why not? And it's this issue of trust. We know that the reason that a number of people are not taking the vaccine is mistrust in the system. And one of the second thing linked to that we've been looking at is telling our personal stories, how we ourselves have moved from possibly not taking to taking, and the reasons why we've shifted. That's actually really important to people, that they listen to people who are influencers, who they trust, who they see as people in the community that are there for them. And if you're willing to take it, why? And being prepared to listen to the concerns and hopefully move people on. I think the role of the church is significant, and we're working with some pastors in Enfield, because one of the things that we've been looking at doing, and I'm sure it may be happening in other places, is the use of church halls as vaccine centres, and having pastors who are on side working with their church communities to encourage them to have the vaccine on their premises, and using the premises in Enfield, some of the church sites, as vaccine centres. So if people won't come to the vaccine comes to them. So it's finding the different strategies that that we feel will work. I think in the end, it's all about hearts and minds, and taking people with us, and being prepared to start with where people are, and listening to the concerns, the mistrust, the understanding about the fact that the vaccine came along so quickly, has it been tested long enough, knowing what the arguments are, and being able to challenge and support at the same time. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks for that, and I'm sure we'll be hearing a bit more from you later on. Dr. Winston Morgan, be nice to hear from you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is a conversation, dialogue about vaccine and vaccine confidence, but I don't think we can really talk about the vaccine without talking about the virus and the impact of the virus in our community, because I think that framed almost everything. And even that we can also push back to just how a community has been, sort of the lived experiences of our community in terms of healthcare generally. But if we go back to the vaccine and the fact that so many of us were, our community was disproportionately affected, and the slowness first to identify it and then explain it has had a big impact on what's happened since then. So people have, had those, if you like, lived experience in the past reinforced that basically we're always going to be the first in line to suffer adverse medical outcomes. And then there was this conversation about, right, we're developing a new vaccine because we know vaccines are the best ways to counteract a virus like COVID-19. And again, the suggestion that our community would be one of the first to get it. And that contradiction of always not being the first in line and suddenly being one of the first in line sort of, again, put people on alert, for want of a better term. And again, without clearly explaining, that was never really government policy or was never really going to happen. So all of these things sort of led to where we are now, where people are really reluctant to, or some people are reluctant, or I wouldn't say they're reluctant, they want more information. I sort of use this term, I've been using it for the last sort of 3 or 4 months, where I talk about agency, where people are demanding information before they take the vaccine. But once they've got that information, they will take the vaccine. So in my role initially, as a scientist, but also someone who understands disparities in a variety of outcomes that affect our communities, I've been talking about, first of all, how the vaccine, I've been able to explain to people how the vaccine, sorry, not the vaccine, the virus has affected our community, and it has nothing to do with genes that make up your race, for example, because the COVID doesn't know whether you're black, white, or whatever. It's just, for example, the sort of the type of work you do, which gives you greater exposure and those kind of things. So I've spent a lot of time trying to explain that. But ironically, the scientific community, they, to a certain extent, they really went hard at looking for an actual link between the disproportionate numbers of people who are described as Black, Asian, and minority ethnic, the same term that people use, and susceptibility to the virus. They really looked hard and they searched, and I used to read a lot of papers where they tried to find, is it a gene that's, they were trying to find a gene and they couldn't find it, so they gave that up. But for a long period of time, and that caused a lot of damage, I think. Rather than just saying, right, these are social conditions, they spent a lot of time trying to, or not eliminating this. So that caused a lot of mistrust. The other thing, so when I've been talking about moving from the virus to the vaccine, the main question people have been asking me is it safe? And again, being, for one thing, a toxicologist, and toxicologists are interested in how you develop new drugs and how you know these drugs are safe. Those are the main questions that people have been asking. Those who are concerned about the vaccine, they're asking, is it safe? And as my colleague Veta said, given that it was developed so quickly, what difference does that make? And having to try and explain that, although it was developed quickly on one level, more time and effort has gone into developing these vaccines than perhaps any other drug in history. So ironically, they are quite safe. And even the thing that we're seeing now, and I don't know if it's time to go into this, the thing about the blood clots, I suspect that hadn't it been done this way, where we've had this intensive set of first clinical trials and then extra rollout, because these are such rare events, we wouldn't have seen it had it been a slow process, because there'd have been just odd events that people would not have picked up. But because so many people are looking at the side effects and the adverse effects in such a concentrated way, we've spotted even these really, these 1 in a million or 1 in half a million or whatever the number is, and it varies depending on where you are. So these are very rare events, but we wouldn't have seen them. So the benefit of having this intensive, rapid rollout of a vaccine is that we've actually seen this, that we probably, because there are lots of probably other drugs with the same kind of adverse event effects that people just don't know about. So going back to the vaccine, I think there's been progress in terms of at the start of the campaign, because I work with the local authority quite on a regular basis, and for the last, again, 4 or 5 months, every 2 weeks, we'd have open sessions where members of the community have come in and sort of asked us questions about, the safety of the vaccine, the efficacy of the vaccine, and we've been able to answer questions. And one of the good things about that is they've come back. You'll have people coming back 2 and 3 times, and once they've asked all the questions they want to ask, then they think, right, I know enough, and then they go and get their vaccines. Whereas a lot of the problems, I think, has been people have wanted to ask questions, but a lot of the people who can answer the questions, or at least they think who can answer the questions, they're on TV or they're very distant. And so one of the benefits of having people like me and Donald is that we're quite close to the community, at least we think we are. And we're able to sort of, make ourselves available, and people can ask me questions back and forth and that kind of thing. And also, and when they've seen something perhaps on social media, they can say, I saw this. I mean, I get people sending me videos all the time. Winston, what do you think of this? Can you explain this? And then I can come back to them and talk to them about that. And that's been quite helpful. And I have seen, I think, movement or shift in terms of how people are thinking about it. I mean, just to finish off, someone who I went to school with, he rang me up and we had a nice long 1-hour conversation, and he put to me all his questions about the vaccine and the safety and why, what's in it, all these kind of things. And I was able to reassure him because we had time and we knew each other for such a long time. And then, I said, yes, right, I'm going off and taking it. And that's how it's been. So it's about this idea of agency. People want to know. It's the obligation of the government and the NHS and everyone else to make sure they have that information. And I think once they have that information, including the risk benefits, because everything's a risk and everything, then they'll take the vaccine quite happily. So I think I'll stop there and let someone else have a go, and then I can always come back.
Thanks for that, Dwayne.
Yeah, having set the scene around the wider implications, I really won't use as much time in giving my half pennyworth at this stage. But I think the most important thing I feel at this stage is that Reach Society is very well placed to connect and communicate to the Black community, because, on the back of the Virtual Careers Conference that we rolled out last week, we made a lot of new friends across the United Kingdom. And so one of the things that I know the Society is minded to do is to continue to beat the drum so that as many people in our community will hear it, that it is important to take all reasonable steps to protect yourself in a situation where it could be fatal. And if it doesn't kill you, it could disable you, which basically takes you out of the game of life, because you'll forever be suffering from something, whether it's a racing heart, whether it's the brain fog that people have talked about, whether it's kidneys or livers that don't work, whether it's upset stomach that don't seem to have any sort of end to it, diarrhea and all sorts of things like that. So we need to understand that long COVID is a big issue. And so we will, within Reach Society, continue to collaborate with our community partners across the United Kingdom to answer questions where people are unsure. And we can do that because in Reach Society, we have access to an awful lot of well-informed professionals. I know 2 of them are with us here in Winston and Donald. But just between Winston and Donald, we know dozens of others who are closely involved, not only in the design and development and the rollout, but who are deeply knowledgeable about the vaccine and the implications. And so we will mine that access to professionals, talented, qualified, experienced professionals, in order to help our community to think its way out of this. And that's why, Rudy, I like the collective responsibility, because what we must not be in any doubt about is that we have the capability of dealing properly with the next stage. And there are many, many Black professionals who are willing to play their part. And within Reach Society, we're willing to do our part in connecting them more strongly with our community. So let me park it there.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Dwayne. Donald?
Thank you, Rudy, and thank you for the invite, and good evening to everyone. And I think everyone has said quite a lot. So the Palmers are left at the end, so we gonna say. But I will touch on some aspect of what Dwayne said. I'm only going to be a couple of minutes, and there's a couple of things, and indeed what my dearest friend and colleague, Dr. Moore, pointed out. Information is key.
Yeah.
And I have to, at one hand, we can say, well, the uptake, and I really like the term agency, but it's partly what Dwayne has mentioned, in that, the community taking responsibility. And what's quite interesting is that there have been members of our community who recognize vaccines play an important role in public health. There's this phrase, in addition to clean water, vaccination has been one of the most important aspects of public health in terms of increasing longevity on the planet. Okay, so there's members of our community who are aware of the issues. They're aware that our concerns are legitimate, and have actually, more than anything, filled that vacuum, put their own money, developed webinars, people like Winston and others who've put on YouTube at his own expense to inform our community. And in fact, there's the Caribbean and African Health Network in Manchester. They've been doing things. There are the Cambridge medics. Some people didn't even know that Cambridge medics existed. They've come together. I think it's been a really remarkable achievement, is that our community has said, hold on a moment, the numbers are low. And what's quite interesting, there's still been no public messaging. So it's people like you, Rudy, and others who said, hold on, we can. And in fact, I was just recently looking at the data, the numbers are increasing. If you go back to, if you just take age 80, the 80 group, which was the first, at the start of January, amongst the Black community, that was in its 40s, 50%. Up to the 7th of April, I've looked at the data, it's now almost 80%. So, and that is because of the constant dialogue. So while we were thinking, well, it's not in the 90s, by continually having this conversation, I'm really endowed by our community. They've said, hold on, and I just want to comment on one other aspect, and which Winston talked about, was around the blood clotting. And I think what should be mentioned is actually a good thing, in the sense that the Medicines and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency, which is such a mouthful, MHRA, have actually been involved and spotting this. And I think we should all be confident that this regulatory body, which is independent from government, that constantly monitors this. And it's not just, I should point out, not just COVID-19 vaccine, but they monitor all drugs. In fact, 2 years ago, I was on that same committee that was looking at yellow fever vaccine. There was a couple of adverse effects of using yellow fever vaccine. So they convened a group of scientists to look at the data. And then a week or so later, having looked at all the data, we've then released our recommendation. So I think one should have confidence in the fact that, we're not hiding anything, that they're prepared to say, well, hold on a moment. This is what the data says, and we're going to constantly monitor. So I'll stop there so that, we can hear from others and, have further discussions.
Thanks for that. Sir Jeff, over to
well,
you.
thank you very much. And I'm speaking from Scotland. So, and we were slow at the beginning, and we don't have a large Black community. But we had, other ethnic groups, and that problem was there, but we've virtually solved that. And why and how? Well, I was telephoned by the Scottish television and asked whether they could film me taking the vaccine. And I said, ring my doctor. And they rang my doctor and they fixed it. And I took the vaccine and it was filmed and it's been put around in the media. And therefore, you know, one of the things that I think that has caused this amongst Black people is at the beginning, and we must acknowledge where mistakes are made. Because if people know they're made and you're not addressing them, then they think you're part of the system and they don't listen to you. So we've got to acknowledge that at the beginning, when the government was talking about vaccination, there were no Black experts standing next to the Prime Minister or the First Minister in Scotland. And we have Black experts on the vaccine. We don't need a pop star or a celebrity to advise Black people what to do. Therefore, we're a diverse society and we need diverse representation at the highest level of expertise. That was a mistake and that should be acknowledged. Now, what is the present situation? The present situation is there's been a lot of misinformation about the vaccine. Initially, it was, you know, especially for Muslim people, it had pork or it had beef, or there were various uncertainties. And the uncertainties involved, you know, is it safe? And Black people have telephoned me from London and are saying, look, you know, there's a debate about, you know, this make and that make. How can we take it if there's a debate? So Black people are pretty sensitive to, in fact, science. And what they're saying is the science is not certain. Why should we take it? You know, we've got enough problems. And I can say to you, the science is sound. It's as sound as, and even sounder for any other drug you take. And therefore, in fact, that question can be answered, that it is safe in terms of as safe as you can get. And that's point one. Another group of people rang me from London in a more cynical way and said, you know, the blood clots. And a relative rang me yesterday and said, they say it's 1 in a million, but I could be just that one. That's very Caribbean. I could be just that one. And I had to say to him, no, that's being, you know, that's not being very wise. And he then accepted that. But these may appear trivial to us, but it's very important to other people who are uncertain and are scared and think it might debilitate them. And therefore, you know, finally, because I don't want to take up too much time, we must understand our culture, how our people think, and the reservations they may have. And some of them are quite valid in terms of their experience. But in terms of the safety of the vaccine, it's scientifically sound. In terms of the blood clotting, it's scientifically sound on the basis that, you know, if you have 1 in 20 million or 20 in 20 million, it is the sort of statistics that applies to everything in life that we do. And therefore, please take it. And the reason why I took it is not about myself. I've heard people saying you'll hurt yourself and you'll get sick. I didn't want to make somebody else sick. And Caribbean people, we have that values in us, that we wouldn't want to hurt somebody else. And for those reasons, you don't know whether somebody else has got it. It could be asymptomatic, that you don't know. So take the vaccine and save not just your life, but somebody else's. And just finally, the Edinburgh and Lothian's health department has just sent me a video on what you need to know about COVID vaccinations. And it's in a lot of different languages. And if anybody wants to access that, please get in touch with the society and we will try and get it to you in different languages. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Sir Jeff. Excellent. Right, just before we close, we've just got another few minutes. I'd just really like to go around again and just really this point around reassurance. And so what would you say in terms of the key words around reassurance for our community? Because at the end of the day, the information's out there as you've set out, but there's still that reassurance. I mean,
Rudy,
what
would
can
you
we
mind
say?
if I kick off?
No, no problem.
Okay, because the reassurance question is a very important question, and I'm pleased that you've asked it. Reach Society, even before we got to this stage, were alarmed by the number of underlying conditions affecting our community. And you know that because you were one of the first people I called and I said, Rudy, how long have you known that our community have suffered from maybe half a dozen underlying conditions? And you said, for more than 10 years. And that really was like a punch in the gut. And I raised it with my management team and I spoke to some of the medical friends of the association. And at that point, we decided we were going to be proactive. We were going to take on the agency of helping our community to do different things. So we have a slogan around the project we launched only last week at our virtual careers conference. It's called the Smart Health Project. And the motto that we've attached to it is better health from better knowledge because Black health matters. Better health from better knowledge because Black health matters. And we will be trumpeting the Smart Health Project for as long as it takes for our community to get the message. With more knowledge, we can indeed achieve better health because our health matters. So absolutely, I agree with the point you've just raised.
Thank you. Angela? You're on mute.
I definitely would agree with that, Dr. Neil. What you said is quite right. There was something that was raised in previous discussions around trusted messengers, and I do think that trusted messengers, is important for the Black community. They need to trust the people that they're getting the information from. Certainly, what we have seen is that there are people who are professionals who can give the information and respond to people in the way that they need to be responded to. And right on this platform, we've got the experts right here, and I do think that it's important. That we have those trusted messengers who keep giving that message out, who keep giving the right message, to take away all the misinformation and to just give the facts so that people can make the right decisions, the right choice to take the vaccine, to protect themselves and to protect others.
Thank you for that. Oveta?
Just to add, Dwayne, I'm so excited to hear about your the project around health, because when the first person I knew very closely died, I was shocked at all the underlying health issues the person was carrying that I didn't know about. And you're so right, it's become the thing that we've discovered, so many people walking around with health issues. But that aside, I think I'm just going to give an example of the trust thing and the being prepared to be the person who answers the challenging questions and educating ourselves, whatever place we're coming from. So obviously Donald and Winston are scientists and in practice now as doctors, whereas some of us aren't, but we still have a responsibility. When I was talking to a group of friends who are coming from a very sort of a church background, they were saying, we're not going to take the Pfizer. I said, why? They said, because there's a chemical in it called luciferase. Lucifer. No, seriously, this is going on. That's why it's important to talk to people.
Yeah.
So large numbers of Black people in the church are not taking the Pfizer or will refuse to take it because luciferase is in there. So I then, from my background, I said, AIDS is about It's an enzyme. I'm guessing it's an enzyme. I looked it up actually afterwards. It's an enzyme. Lus is light in Latin. There's a light reaction, chemical reaction within the Pfizer, and just taking time to explain it. And these are the things that we have to do. So people are looking at the bottle, and that was a WhatsApp going round.
Yeah.
Luciferase is in Pfizer. Lucifer, devil. So, you know, the fallen angel. So I'm not touching it. So we have to be prepared to deal with the myths and to unpick them, give people time, because if we just laugh at them, they'll just run away and say, that's it. And it's about being prepared to listen and respond with truth. So I'll just stop there.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Winston? So unmute.
Yeah. So I really also don't want people to feel that if you have any questions or any doubts, it's a terrible or almost an ignorant place to be, because that's not what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And my colleagues have been talking about the fact that for years, it's been known that our community are more likely to have a variety of medical conditions. And, you know, it hasn't been a big thing in the past. And that's really something that those kind of structural things really need to be addressed. So when we do hopefully get past this COVID thing, we need to keep that momentum going and make sure that you know, we don't, this kind of knowledge is not just within the academic community. It's in textbooks. People talk about it in lectures. That, you know, for example, you know, whether it's in blood pressure or kidney disease, it's talked about all the time about how our communities are disproportionately affected. The other thing I want to say to finish off also is about the responsibility of government and the NHS to deliver the vaccine to our communities. It's all very well saying that you must go and take it, but how efficient have the authorities been in making the vaccine available to people who, you know, and to communicate as well, as I said, in an effective way. You know, we need more people going in, employed by the government, employed by the NHS, to go into these communities and talk to people. And I don't think that's happening enough. So there are those issues, these structural issues that we need to address. So yes, we need to encourage people to do it, but to take the vaccine, but we also have to make sure that we don't sort of always blame us for the fact that the uptake isn't as great as it could be. And there's also something else. I mean, you think about, you know, people who are taking the vaccine, they trust the government because the government and the NHS has delivered for them. If a lot of people don't trust the vaccine and don't trust the government because the government hasn't delivered for them, it might be a bit controversial, but that's what it is. So government and politicians and, you know, the senior leaders really need to sort of make that effort to do a bit more. So we have our agency, we need to do our bit, but also I think we need to also put pressure on those people to make sure that they're delivering for us, because we are part of this society, we are part of this community. And I'll stop there again.
Thank you very much. Donald?
No, I think, you know, what a veteran, what we've all said is, I think, is really powerful in continuing the dialogue, because by continuing the dialogue, by talking to folks, the numbers taking the vaccine will increase, and they seem to be doing so. So what we should also be having, and my dear friend Dwayne talked about this, is also the concept of post-COVID, and thinking about that, because often, you know, our community, you know, we may react to certain things, and what we need to do is think ahead. So there's been various reports that people have been looking at, talking about post-COVID. The British Society have looked at this and talked about the economic and social impact on young people. And in fact, this week, there was news report on Black youth unemployment. And this is very similar now to what happened with the economic crash, you know, what, 2008, 2009? And so because we know what the future will be, we actually have an idea of what's going to happen. And Dwayne touched on this. we should now, as a community, put things in place so it doesn't have the detrimental impact it will have on our young people. It will, and we know that. And given that, so one is the vaccine, but we should also now be having that discussion to say, how can we mitigate what's clearly going to be happening to our young people? And that's something I know Reach Society has been sort of thinking about in having that discussion. And this could be where community groups can collectively come together to develop strategies and help to support young people. But if we don't, then I am concerned about the next generation.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for that. And the final word with Sir Jeff.
Thank you very much. And it's been a most enlightening meeting. And what I would like to say finally, and I won't take very long, you know, I was brought up in a home in Jamaica with a lot of aunts, and they taught me one thing, you know, don't do unto somebody else that what you would not like them to do unto you. And therefore, that's my values. And I think those are the values of Caribbean people and Black people in general. And therefore, I feel that please use that values. You don't have to listen to a lot else, because if you get it, the virus and you're affected by it, then you may just harm somebody else's child or somebody else's family. And I'd like you to really think of that. And then I know you'll do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And so everybody, thank you very much for your input. And I'll just lastly, just to say to everybody that the aim of this knowledge exchange and thought leadership forum has been to provide insight for improving collective responsibility through professional commitment for community progression. Thank you very much and good night.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rudy.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
No.
Night.
Night.
All right.